The rain had washed a week's worth of city grime into the storm drains behind Dante's deep dish, leaving behind a collection of lost trinkets. Silas knelt by the iron grate while taking out the kitchen trash, his fingers brushing against a phone that shouldn't have been there. It was sleek, obsidian black, and oddly heavy. When he pressed the power button, the screen didn't show a logo. Instead, a single icon flickered in the center. An open eye. Silas met Alara in the flour-dusted kitchen, the phone burning a hole in his apron pocket. "It doesn't have a SIM card," he whispered, sliding the device across the stainless steel prep table. Alara tapped the eye icon. The camera opened, but the image on the screen wasn't the pizza kitchen they were standing in. It was the same room, but drained of color, gray and weeping with digital static. "Look at that customer over there," Silas said, pointing to a man waiting by the soda fountain in the lobby. Through the phone's lens, a tall, spindly shadow stood directly behind the man. The shadow had no face, only a jagged tear where a mouth should be. When the customer moved to grab a napkin, the shadow mimicked him perfectly, but its long, needle-like fingers were inches from the man's neck. Alara shivered, pushing the phone back toward Silas. "Throw it away, Silas. It's a trick, a filter." He tried to agree, tossing the device into a heavy metal trash bin out back. They walked back into the shop quickly, their footsteps echoing against the tile. But when Silas reached into his pocket to grab the walk-in freezer keys, his fingers brushed against cold, smooth glass. The phone had returned. By the time they started the closing shift, the air in the store had turned freezing. Alara rubbed her arms, her breath hitching in the cold. Silas lifted the phone one more time. Through the screen, the world was a nightmare of static. A shadow was no longer behind the customer. It was wrapped around Alara's shoulders, its long, smoky arms coiled like serpents around her throat. "Run outside, Alara. Don't look back," Silas yelled. He fumbled with the screen, trying to delete the app, but the eye icon just grew larger, blinking at him. The phone began to vibrate, a low hum that vibrated through his bones. The static on the screen started to bleed out of the edges, a black mist curling around his own wrists. Silas fled to the walk-in freezer, locking the heavy door and shoving a crate of tomatoes under the handle. He slumped against the frozen wall, the phone still glowing in his hand. The room was dark, but the screen cast a sickly, flickering light. He realized with a jolt of terror that the shadow wasn't just on the screen anymore. It was casting a shadow of its own on the frosted metal wall. The hum from the phone became a screech. Silas watched in frozen silence as a long, obsidian finger poked through the glass of the screen. It didn't break the glass. It moved through it like water. Then another finger followed, and another. The shadow was pulling itself out of the digital world, using the phone as a doorway inside the cramped freezer. There was a soft knock at the freezer door. "Silas, it's me," Alara's voice came from the kitchen. Silas lifted the phone to the small glass porthole in the door. Through the static-filled screen, Alara wasn't standing there. Instead, the spindly shadow from the lobby was wearing her apron, its jagged mouth stretched into a silent, horrific grin. It reached for the lever. Silas dropped the phone. It hit the floor and shattered, the glass spraying across the frozen floor. The screaming hum stopped instantly. Silence filled the room. Silas looked down at the broken device. Through the largest shard of glass, he saw himself. But he was flat, gray, and trapped in a world of static. On the floor, a shadow stood up, tall and solid. The shadow figure didn't leave. It bent down, its movements fluid and wrong, and picked up the largest shard of glass, the one containing the real Silas. It tucked the shard into its pocket and stood tall. It smoothed out Silas's apron and adjusted its cap. The shadow looked into the freezer mirror, and for a moment, its face flickered into a perfect, smiling copy of Silas. Shadow Silas walked back into the kitchen. He began to prepare a pizza, but he didn't use the fresh dough. He reached into the air, pulling strands of thick, oily static from the corners of the ceiling. He kneaded the darkness into a round crust, the pizza pulsing with a dim, rhythmic light that matched the blinking eye from the phone. The freezer door creaked open, and the real Alara stepped back into the kitchen, looking confused. "Silas, I thought I heard a crash." She saw him standing at the table, his back to her. "Are you okay? You look different." Shadow Silas didn't turn around yet. He just kept working the dark, bubbling dough, the shard in his pocket vibrating with Silas's silent screams. Shadow Silas turned, holding a slice of the dark, shimmering pizza. "Try a piece, Alara," he said, his voice sounding like a recording played from a distance. Alara, dazed and seemingly under a spell, took a bite. As she chewed, her eyes didn't widen in disgust. Instead, her pupils began to flicker with gray static, and the eye icon appeared deep within her iris. The next morning, the neon sign of Dante's deep dish flickered, the letters shifting until they spelled static dish. Behind the counter, Silas and Alara stood side by side, their smiles identical and unmoving. They waited for the first customer of the day to walk through the door, their fingers twitching in unison as the eye on the shop's new digital menu blinked at the street.